Hi, everyone. Next up on our How to Make and Present a Poster workshop series, we're going to be talking about aesthetics. So although you might hear the word aesthetics and think, well, that's superficial, like what it looks like shouldn't matter, it's the content that counts. The answer is that it's not very superficial at all. Posters are books that are being judged by their covers. And the most information you should be able to get from a poster anyway is like the inside flap, right? It helps you stand out a lot. Your poster says something about you. The way it looks says something about your poster and your research before you even begin to talk or they get close enough to your poster to learn more, which is actually a pretty good thing considering that, there's not that much space on a poster, there's only a limited amount of space and that you want to try and say as much as possible without using any words, as we'll get into in the next section. So here's a little bit of information about what posters usually look like. The aesthetics are usually dimensions about 4:3, so 48 to 36 is a pretty common poster size. And then you can either do it horizontally, which is how most posters are presented, or maybe you try a vertical one. It might help you stand out, which is always good when you're in a sea of other posters. Find what works best, try out both, maybe do a couple of drafts early on and see which feels better. All right, so let's jump into some more heavy design stuff. So your title should be readable from about 10 feet away from you. So the font size should be at least 90 plus. This is basically the spark notes of your poster, right? So make sure people who may be interested are able to see it from across the, the aisle. Also, make sure to preserve the italics and capitalizations in the title. It can be very easy to, C. elegans or your model organism, those should all be italicized, right? Make sure you get your capitalization of genes versus proteins and things like that all correct. Those things do matter and will help specific people who know about your field to be able to identify what is of interest to them in your poster. So your fonts, you should generally try to use sans serif for your title. So basically, if you don't know much about fonts, which I didn't before, basically a serif is like the little line at the end of each of the letters, right? So sans serif without serif. So these are your fonts like Arial, Helvetica, and Tahoma. Then serif for smaller text, right? So you should use sans serif for your big titles, your subtitles, things like that. But then you should use serif fonts for your smaller text because it's been shown to be much easier to read. And when you're already printing kind of small, you should try to optimize ease of readability as much as possible. So your serif fonts or your Times New Roman, your Georgia, your Palatino, and your Garamond, right? Those types of fonts. So then you should put your name and the names of your PIs and your lab mates who contributed underneath the title. Make sure to check in with your PI about this. Names and the order in which the names are presented and their affiliations, all of these things matter quite a bit. So make sure that you don't accidentally offend anyone, leave them off or put them in the wrong order. So check in with your PI or your grad student or whoever is leading you in this poster making process. Feel free to put those relevant affiliations at the bottom. If people really care about what school or affiliations these people have, they can always come closer to check it out. But putting them at the top kind of clutters the whole poster up. And so you can put them at the bottom down with your references if you really feel like you need that. So all of your text boxes, so we look at the text boxes, you're going to want them about the same size, right? So all of these text boxes are the same width. If you kind of change it up, it can look visually striking or different and kind of draw attention that way. But a lot of times it's more confusing than anything else. So try and make all of your text boxes or your columns at least the same size. Also use a very, very light background, right? This white background is, saves on ink, but also helps make the words pop a little bit better. It's been shown that dark text on a light background is actually the easiest to read. Although here we kind of have these, each of our columns or text boxes shown in this light purple color. In reality, it probably should not be. So this is just to show you where the text boxes would be without typing up a bunch of text. But basically, you're going to want to only use boxes and things like that on the biggest takeaways, right? Try and leave as much white space as possible. Try and, use these things sparingly so that when you do need to emphasize one big conclusion or, your question or something like that, you can put that in a box and it will stand out a lot better. All right, speaking of color, let's get serious here, right? Please, please, please only pick two major colors, right? One of them should be white, basically, or light gray or off white or something like that, but basically a white color. And the other one, you can pick, it could be a warm color, it could be a cool color. It can help if it says something about your area of research. If there's a certain color associated with what you're researching, maybe try and use that color to help, people make quick correlations when they're walking by posters. As you can see here, picking more than one color can be very, very distracting. It doesn't look good. It detracts more than it helps. Keeping a plain background, these gradient backgrounds are distracting and kind of dated, honestly. Having a picture as a background makes it hard to read text. There's a lot of consideration. So please pick two colors and stick to those. And if you really need other colors, use, shades or tints of the one non-white color you've selected. Also be aware of color blindness, right? Those with color deficient alleles, which is like 8% of males and like 0.5% of females, they want to read your research too. So be aware, try not to do red greens, which is the most common type of color blindness, but just be aware of different types of color blindness and try to avoid making your research incidentally unreadable to interested people. And finally, we want you to take a look at the white space here, right? That means the spacing between bullet points. That means the spacing between columns, the spacing around figures, things like that. So try and maintain as much white space as possible. Don't feel pressured to crowd it up, right? Sometimes we have this correlation in our minds that the more stuff we have on our poster, the more work we must have done, right? And that's not necessarily true. What's much more impressive is a well put together poster, a poster where they can find very easily your conclusions, your question. These people are standing there in front of your poster for what, 10 minutes, they don't have time to dig through everything that you want to talk about potentially. So don't feel pressured to fill all the white space with pictures or something like that. Make it clear, make your takeaways, essential, and then leave the rest to your presentation, which we'll talk about in a later video. Additionally, you might want to try to make it very clear where they should look and in what order, right? Maybe try numbering 1, 2, 3, 4, or something like that. You could draw arrows between relevant boxes if that's a good thing. If you walk away from your poster, someone should be able to come up to it and know exactly what order in which to read each section, and be able to, still get a pretty good idea about what the poster is about without you being there to lead them through it. And then finally, we have some good ideas for text sizes. So the main title, as we said, should be a 90 plus points size. Subtitles can be 36 to 48. Body should be somewhere between 28 to 32, and references can be much smaller. And if they really want that information, they can get up close. One of the cool things with technology now is you could put a QR code on your poster. If you put a QR code that takes them to a document that maybe has all your references listed, that saves you some space on the poster and makes you look maybe a little more sciencey, a little more techie, right? So consider what we have as far as technology, as far as presentation builders that we have available to us, and try and incorporate those into your poster. We are in the 21st century, even though posters are usually, paper and ink. So with that wraps up our aesthetic section. If you have any questions, make sure to leave them below in the comments, and we'd love to answer them. See you on the next video.